Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9. I'm Paul Kretschmer. The topic today is human trafficking, and an author has written a book after studying the situation for a year. Today's guest is John DiGirolamo to talk about it. As far as listeners are concerned, what major point would you like people to take away from that will motivate them to take action on what you've shared with them?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some misperceptions out there that should be addressed, and what I'm hoping is that people will get some education through awareness, and and then hopefully buy the book and get a great story, as well as kind of learn what really happens out there.
Okay, what started your journey on writing this book and taking the views and information that you share in it then?
Yeah, so I think it's one of the most underreported issue that we've got out there. It's something that, in my opinion, is one of the most evil things someone can do to someone else. And I really wanted to give survivors a voice, as well as those who combat human trafficking, and this was my way of doing that. Okay. In your perspective, how common is human trafficking at the present time? Yeah, I think it's pretty common. It's in every state. It's in small towns, big towns, large cities, on the border, nice suburban areas. So it's really everywhere, and the internet and the pandemic have made it worse.
Are there areas of some states that have developed a reputation for trafficking, which in some ways causes officials in smaller communities in those same states to feel like they've missed the bullet and therefore don't have to pay attention because it's somebody else's problem?
I think that's more of a general thought process, where I think a lot of people don't believe it happens in their community. And I go around talking to people, talking about the book, talking about online safety, and people are surprised when I put all these headlines up from all over the country, and they're mostly in towns you've never heard of. So yes, it's going to happen in New York City and Los Angeles, but it's also happening kind of right under everyone's nose.
I was curious about that, John, because there's a stretch of highway in Connecticut between New Haven and Hartford, through the center of the state roughly, that has a lot of motels and motor inns and places like that. And as long as I've lived in Connecticut, which is 40 years now, there's been a reputation along the Berlin Turnpike, as they call it, for trafficking and for motels getting busted repeatedly for human trafficking violations.
Yeah, any kind of major thoroughfare is a hub for that. Where I live in Colorado, we have I-25, I-70, and I-80 is just a little bit north of us in Wyoming, and it's a major movement of trafficking. And there's this organization called Truckers Against Trafficking who try to help combat this issue. But truck stops, cheap motels, unfortunately, if it's a major thoroughfare, they're going to use that, and they're going to try to move people around, so they step one step ahead of the law, so to speak.
With that seeming lucrative business, then how do people get involved in it in the first place? I mean, the people who are operating it.
Yeah, you mean the criminals?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a wide variety of criminals. There's definitely a gang element that you see, where that's one of the criminal activities that they do, besides typically drugs and illegal guns, but a lot of them are just sort of people who have no regard for other people. They're looking to make quick dollars, and unlike the drug industry where you have to buy something or create it in a lab, they're just taking a person and using them over and over again, and they feel like that is a easy commodity for them, unfortunately. And it just turns out to be very financially lucrative.
Could you give us some of the elements of a profile of someone who would get swept into something like trafficking? What's the some of the characteristics, at least, of the victim who finds themselves in a situation like that they can't escape on their own?
Yeah, I would say that it kind of breaks down into three categories. And, one at-risk category is going to be somebody that is a runaway. And if somebody is, under 18 and out on the streets by themselves, the statistics show that within 48 hours they've been approached by somebody for some kind of trafficking. And a lot of times if they're a runaway, that implies that there's some desperation. That probably means that they don't have a lot of money. And one of the things the first thing that's traded for, trading your body for is going to be food and shelter. And that's exactly what a runaway needs. The second category, I would say, is somebody who is kind of fallen through the cracks in the foster system. There's a lot of great foster and adoptive parents out there, but there's just a lot of people who are not that attentive and loving, and so you've got that category. And then the third part would be, I think, the part that surprises people, which is the person who is still living at home, still going to school, and typically the situation in that case is they're being exploited by somebody that they know. It can be a family member, a neighbor, a so-called friend, someone who they met online, and so that kind of middle-class, suburban, small-town American kid is the surprise where that's somebody who's also being exploited. And there's a couple of plot lines in my book that reveal that situation and then how that person got groomed.
As far as the various levels of law enforcement are concerned, how do you see the current state of cooperation between those levels existing at present, and are there one or more levels that need to take the lead to kind of crystallize a common sense, successful approach to cutting this human trafficking off?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in play here, and one of them is that even though I think this is an underreported issue, I see the trend that it's starting to get more coverage, and so you're seeing more attention by law enforcement. You're seeing law enforcement get training for this kind of criminal activity. There's more task forces. On the negative side is a lot of crimes that used to be felonies are now kicked down to misdemeanors. And so somebody that may get picked up by the police, and that could be a criminal or it could be a victim, they may not get into the system because of that. And because they're now just getting a citation or something like that, because it's a lower level crime. And so you're starting to see that, kind of play against each other. And, when I interviewed the law enforcement officer in the Denver metro area, he said that their task force worked on about 100 cases a year. He thought that there was probably 1,000 cases in the Denver metro area. So that means that they're only looking at 10% of what's going on out there.
Thank you very much for your time, John. I appreciate the opportunity at long last to get together on the phone like this.
Yeah, really appreciate talking to you today.
My guest on today's Human Trafficking Conversation, John DiGirolamo. For further information, call us at 860-346-1049. 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff or management of the station. I'm Paul Kretschmer on the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9 WIHS.